In episode 2, they all wake up the next morning and they feel pretty shitty. They feel like they're suffering from a hangover, but they all have their powers back. Everybody except Klaus. He feels fine. And when they meet up at Luther's place, they're trying to figure out exactly how this happened. Now, some of their powers are changed up a little bit. Like Lila, she can now shoot laser beams out of her eyeballs. So in a way, her powers are advanced. And then there's Ben. He now has tentacles as tails. But it's also Ben who tells them exactly what happened to him, how he spiked all of their sake bombs, how he knew that they needed their powers back, and how he gave them what they wanted. But initially, they're not happy about it. They feel like it was a violation by Ben to do what he did. But then they start trying to figure out why Klaus isn't sick, and he admits that he never drank the sake bomb. He didn't think it was worth it. And now that he knows exactly what was in it, he's happy he didn't. He's the only one who doesn't have powers at the moment. They kind of brush that Klaus news aside, though, and start bickering once again on why they didn't want their powers back. It all has to do with ending the world a couple times, but saving the world a couple times. There's arguments on both sides, but at the moment, there's really no seeing eye to eye. While Ben is trying to convince him that they actually do want their powers back, he gets violently ill. And while he somewhat sobers up, they decide that they do need to go back to the dry cleaners to get more information. But when they get there, Sai isn't there. There is, however, a map pointed to a place called New Grumson, Maine. They don't know exactly what's in New Grumson. It could be Sai, it could be his daughter Jennifer, it could be a trap, but they're willing to see what exactly is in New Grumson, so they all pile into Diego's crappy van and they head there. The problem is they're all feeling the effects of that marigold. They're all starting to get sick. Late at night, though, Diego, while still driving, reveals to number 5 that he knows Lila's up to some shady stuff. He followed her, he saw her in a diner with some random guy, and the thing is, he doesn't know that number 5 was the other guy. So number 5, not telling Diego exactly what actually happened in that coffee shop, just says, Diego, whatever you think it is, it's not. Lila's not throwing away what she has with you. The next morning, they get to the outskirts of New Grumson, and 5 looks through the phone book. There is no Jennifer or Sai, and they realize they're just going to have to go into town and look for them. Ben, however, gets so frustrated that he decides, you know what, screw this, I'm going back home. And he heads into town, but he looks for a bus station instead of Jennifer or Sai. He finds a bus station, but it's right outside of a diner, so he heads in, and he ends up insulting the locals there. The one guy actually is the sheriff, and the girl who runs the place, who's named Rosie, well, she doesn't take too kindly to Ben's attitude, so she kicks him out of the diner. The rest of them head into town, and they do split up. Diego, Lila, and 5 kind of walk around this Christmas village, while Victor, Allison, and Luther go and look at an antique store. Klaus, meanwhile, is going to sit back with the van. While over at the antique store, Allison and Victor have a little bit of an awkward conversation. Allison hasn't heard from Victor in 5 years, and she's wondering why, and Victor says, well, phones do work both ways. Look, you did what you did, and I get it. You got Claire and Ray. Even though, by the way, Allison has since lost Ray, but still, nonetheless. Victor tells her that he understands why she did what she did, but the fact is, they're never going to be friends. And that's okay. Not too far away, while they were having that conversation, Ben found his way back into the diner. Rosie, who was having lunch, saw Ben sitting out there all sad and lonely and felt bad for him, so she invited him in, and the two struck up a conversation. They start a little bit of a get-to-know-you, their backstories a little bit. She tells him that her parents died when she was young, and the guy that he insulted initially, the town sheriff, is like family. He's her uncle. He understands that because he didn't grow up with a normal family. While these two didn't start out on the best terms, they definitely have a connection. But on the outside, Ben's family is finding out that there's more to this town than meets the eye. It all really kicks off when Allison asks the woman who owns the antique store, "Do you know Jennifer Grossman?" And the woman says she doesn't know, but this little old lady who's in a wheelchair goes back inside, grabs a shotgun, and tries to take it to Allison, Luther, and Victor. They're only saved because Victor uses his powers to thwart the woman. And it's not like Diego and Lila and 5 didn't have the same outcome. While they were looking around the Christmas village, they noticed that everybody was looking at them, and everybody was armed with guns. When they tried to flee, number 5's powers transported him to a random subway stop. with a bunch of symbols rather than letters. The train shows up shortly after with an automated message that most trains will have, but this one is backwards. Now, I did actually look into what was actually being said. I recorded it, I reversed it. It's really just normal train lingo. Stand clear of the closing doors, that sort of thing. It's nothing Easter eggish. But when 5 takes that train, he gets off at the very next stop. He walks up the steps, and he finds that he's in New Grumson, but it's different because he's in a new timeline. As Allison, Luther, Victor, Lila, and Diego fight for their lives, it's not like Ben is having a good time either. When the fighting kicked off, Rosie's uncle, the town sheriff, tried to get her out of there, but Ben, having a suspicious feeling about this guy, didn't want to let her go. The guy tried to taser Ben, which caused Ben's tentacles to come out, revealing his powers. And even after all of that, Rosie decided to go with him instead of the guy that she's known her whole life, her uncle. And when she did go with Ben and they ran out the door, her uncle radioed to somebody on where they were headed. Thanks to their powers, Diego and Lila are able to take out all the guys with guns, and they start making a mad dash towards the van with Klaus. Ben and Rosie do the same thing, and what they find is Klaus is talking to a woman who claims to be Jennifer. But when Rosie hears that, she screams, "No, I'm Jennifer. I only put Rosie on my name tag so guys don't stalk me." And Klaus, who's just being naive at this point, looks at the woman and says, "Okay, so if she's Jennifer, then who exactly are you?" But the woman never answers that question. She just looks at Klaus and says, "You never should have come," and then pulls out a gun and shoots him. And since Klaus doesn't have any powers, this gunshot could be fatal. She tries to take Jennifer at gunpoint, but Ben uses his powers to kill her. Now the big concern is saving Klaus's life, but also picking up Luther, Allison, and Victor. And they're also trying to make their way out of town, but Luther notices something interesting about a few of the dead guys that Lila and Diego took out. They're wearing Hargraves Enterprises tactical gear, meaning that Reginald had basically stuck Jennifer in this town and Truman showed her. Luther doesn't have a lot of time to dwell on this because they, just like Diego and Lila, have people chasing after them. That's when Allison realizes that her powers are tweaked a little bit as well. She no longer has to say, "I heard a rumor." She literally just looks at a guy, thinking about what she wants him to do, and he does it. He turns the gun on everybody he's with, and then he kills himself. 5 reappears, and Diego picks them up a short time later. When they all pile into the van, everybody is tending to Klaus, who's clinging to life. And there's really only one option to save his life, and that's to give him Marigold. Now, there is an argument going back and forth on whether or not that's the right thing to do because Klaus was so against it, but Allison makes a decision that she has to do it to save his life, and she plugs the hole with this stuff. It works. Klaus comes back to life, and he seems to be fine. When everybody kind of calms down in the car, Ben turns to Jennifer and says, "We're going to get you back to your dad." But Jennifer looks at him and says, "My dad? Who are you talking about?" And he tells her, "Cy Grossman?" But she's never heard of Cy Grossman. And that's when their van is T-boned by Jean and Jean. When the car is hit, Ben and Jennifer's hands touch, and there's a fiery aura around them. But everybody in the car is pretty dazed. And that's when Jean and Jean get out, open the van door, they take Jennifer, and then before she leaves, female Jean looks inside and sees Lila and shakes her head and just says, "Nancy, Nancy, Nancy." Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry, it'll be up in a day or two.